In 2007, Team Ico started development on The Last Guardian, a game that was only supposed to take a few years to make. A trailer was shown at E3 in 2009 that generated a lot of buzz surrounding the innovative title. But when 2015 rolled around and the game still hadn't been released, people began to wonder, will The Last Guardian ever see the light of day? Fumito Ueda came up with the idea for The Last Guardian in 2005. One aspect of Shadow of the Colossus that took him completely off guard was how drawn people were to Wander's horse. In fact, the horse and Wander made for a more dynamic relationship within the game than Wander and the girl he's trying to help. Ueda then decided to make an animal-human relationship for this game the main focus. By 2007, everything had been set into place, and the company moved into the pre-production stage. Ueda wanted The Last Guardian to be a quick game to get the company to transition into the new, high-powered console generation of the PS3. In an interview, he stated, "We thought that Ico and Shadow of the Colossus took a long time to develop, so one of the missions of The Last Guardian was that we wanted to create something good in a short period of time." I'm sorry. Okay. In 2009, we had a beautiful trailer featuring what appeared to be real-time graphics. It was absolutely breathtaking. Everything went well, and the game appeared to be sailing smoothly towards its 2011 release date. It was later revealed that that demonstration wasn't actual gameplay. It was a pre-rendered sequence done to avoid showing many of the bugs and issues the game was having. This revelation only came as a response to how a game that looked to be so far in development still hadn't come out some years later. Either they tell people that the game really was close to release back in 2009 and that they just hadn't made much progress over the last several years, or they admit that they used fake graphics and that these past 7 years have actually been full of progress and improvements aimed at achieving the look of that trailer. Turns out the latter was the case, and the game's development wasn't nearly as far along as we'd been led to believe. The length of this game's development can largely be attributed to one decision made by Sony. The game was coming along nicely, but as 2011 approached, they realized they might need a little more time in order to finish it up. Sony was gearing up for the release of their PlayStation 4 in 2013, and began thinking that if this game couldn't be released in 2011, they may as well wait for the next console generation and release it then. This is the type of game that would have been used to market how good the PS4 looks. Ueda was not a huge fan of this decision, but his team, Team Ico, was part of Product Development Department Number 1, which is a Sony-owned company, with Sony controlling their distribution plans. If Sony decides that the game should come out on a different system, there's not much you can do, as Ueda learned. He was not at all pleased with Sony wanting to shift development to the PS4. Although The Last Guardian was taking a little longer than expected, he knew that changing game engines and consoles would put years onto the development of this game. He felt as though the game would have been just fine on the PlayStation 3, and he pushed hard for a release on that system. As the team began to look into the PS4 and saw how tough it was going to be to port the game over, Ueda made a fateful decision. In April of 2011, Sony announced that The Last Guardian would miss its 2011 release date. In December of that same year, Fumito Ueda announced that he was leaving the company. This took many people by surprise, especially since he was in the middle of directing a big project. He later said that he felt a sense of crisis within himself after the delay was announced. Remember, this game was not supposed to have a long development. He was hoping it would be shorter than even the 4 years it took to make Shadow of the Colossus or Ico. He elected to start his own company and called it GENdesign. Ueda remained the director of this game despite working with a new company. However, Sony didn't just hand the project over. They kept all of that within Sony Japan Studios' Product Development Department Number 1. That's a mouthful. This means that GENdesign is only capable of doing art direction, script writing, and asset creation, and then giving it to Sony to implement into the actual game. This is probably for the best, as GENdesign is only a team of about 5 people at the moment, one of these being Team Ico's lead programmer, Jinji Horagai. Ueda still supervises the creation and implementation of these assets, but there's now an extra step in the process that certainly has not helped their efficiency. It's important to note, though, that Ueda chose to remain on the project instead of moving on to something else. He still believes in The Last Guardian. Since moving on to the PS4, The Last Guardian will no longer be the graphical marvel that it was once hoped to be, relative to other games launching around the same time. Ueda didn't feel that it needed to be pushed to the PS4. It was nearing completion and his vision had been realized to his liking. However, Sony being Sony and wanting to sell their new hardware, had the last say with this game. Sony offered several teams and lots of specialists to come and help review the code and aid the game in its transition from the PS3 to the PS4. Even the architect of the PS4 himself, Mark Cerny, was brought on to help get things up to speed with the new hardware. In the end, there was little that could be done. The project dragged along at a snail's pace. After years of silence following the 2011 delay and many media outlets reporting that the game had been outright cancelled, 2015 had a nice surprise in store for fans of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. At E3 that year, The Last Guardian showed up to thunderous applause. It was finally back on track, avoiding cancellation due to the passionate fanbase that Sony knew would still purchase the game more than 10 years after the last entry from Team Ico. The month before its October 2016 release date, it was announced that The Last Guardian was being pushed back to December of the same year. This would be its final delay. Just before the game's release, Ueda published an open letter to those who'd been following the development of The Last Guardian. In that letter, he expressed remorse at the game's lengthy development, but also his hope that players will enjoy the scenery of the game and appreciate its conclusion. In the end, he's proud of what they were able to accomplish and states that The Last Guardian will offer players an experience unlike any other. After all the changes, mismanagement, and prolonged development of The Last Guardian, it finally came out on December 6th, 2016. The question of whether it lives up to the expectations set by games like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus is up to you. But seeing as this game took longer to develop than both of those games combined, I'd say we could be in for a real treat. Hope you enjoyed episode 4 of Dark History. You can watch episode 3 by clicking right next to me here. And if you want to be notified when episode 5 comes out, click the bell next to the subscribe button. It's going to be about how the sketchy work environment of Japanese companies has affected the gaming industry, and look for it sometime late January. You guys are beasts. Thanks.